So maybe no one's heard anything I've just said because I have been muted this entire time. Yay! All right, back to the beginning, folks. Starting over. My name is Lauren Littlefield, and I'm the Executive Director of the Utah Democratic Party. Thank you so much for joining us today. I did already do this part, so if you are a lip reader, then well done. So we're going to talk about national delegates today. We've had a lot of excitement and a lot of interest in how people can support their favorite presidential candidate and potentially go on to support them as a delegate at the Democratic National Convention in where? Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Super excited about that. Philadelphia is a great city, and they're very excited to host the Democratic National Convention, July 25th through 29th. Yes, it is a little bit earlier than it was 40 years ago, so it'll be nice and warm in Philadelphia, but we're going to have a great time there. So a couple of things that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about Utah's caucus system, which is important because this is how we get, candidates to become nominees to our ballot, but it's also how you become a state delegate and how you're able to vote for those. And then it's also the first step in becoming a national delegate. We'll talk about what a delegate is. We'll talk about the presidential preference poll and how you support your favorite candidate with your vote on March 22nd. We'll talk about how you file to run as a national delegate. We'll talk about how you campaign for that spot. And then we'll talk about the state convention and how those elections work. And then we'll take questions. So first things first. The neighborhood caucuses are the first step in Utah's caucus system. This is where we gather with our neighbors and other Democrats in our area. And the first step is we vote in the presidential preference poll. So you'll walk into your caucus location, which can be found at utdem.org/caucus night 2016. You'll walk in, you'll fill out your check-in form with all the contact info, and that same piece of paper is your ballot. So you'll fill that in, give that to a volunteer, and then we encourage you to stay and get elected a state delegate. Now, state delegates are important because it's those delegates that will go on to elect the national delegates. So if you plan to run for national delegate, you should definitely become a state delegate. The next step is the county convention. The county convention is where you're going to elect your county local officials. So your county mayor, your county district attorney, maybe your county council members, and then sometimes you'll elect your state representatives. So if a state legislator's legislative district is completely within Salt Lake County, for example, and there's 2 Democrats running in that race, then you might vote for that state representative at your county convention. The last step in the caucus system is the state convention, which is April 22nd and 23rd, right here in Salt Lake City. It's going to be at the Salt Palace Convention Center. And this is where we're going to elect our statewide and federal candidates. We'll have nominations open for a gubernatorial candidate. We'll have nominations open for U.S. Senate, all 4 congressional districts, Attorney General, and that's where we'll vote for those people. But the reason you're here this morning is that is where we're going to elect national delegates. So we'll break up into congressional districts and hold an election that way. Don't worry, I'll get more into that. So let's talk about what a delegate is. So a delegate is a citizen in a precinct that represents the other people in that precinct and you're voting, right? This is the spirit of what a delegate is. It's basically a microcosm representative. So instead of sending a congressional candidate to, for example, to Congress to represent 200,000 constituents, this delegate is going to the state convention and the county convention representing the Democrats within that precinct. To be elected as a delegate, you have to live in the precinct that you're running for. So the same as you would go to your polling location on election day and you have to go to the right polling location within your precinct, it's the same thing with caucus night. You've got to make sure you go to the correct caucus location. And you have to be 18 years old by the date of the election. So that means if you are an excited 17-year-old who's going to be 18 in, as long as it's before November 8th, 2016, you are absolutely eligible to vote, and please come to our caucus and start participating in the process. Delegates are responsible for electing candidates who will represent the Democratic Party in partisan elections. So for example, when Ben McAdams was elected the county mayor, several Democrats ran to replace him in Senate District 2. And it was the state delegates from Senate District 2 that actually that they actually voted to replace Ben with Senator Jim DeBacchus. So that's one of the fun things that we delegates get to do. National delegates, however, these are individuals chosen to represent their state at the party convention prior to a presidential election. So we might be granted extra delegates, you know, as a reward if the state has a recent history of supporting the party, or, you know, sometimes delegates are just allocated based on the percentage of votes that are granted in the Electoral College, which is a whole lot of mumbo jumbo and confusing stuff. So don't worry, we'll talk more about it. Utah has been allocated 40 delegate slots. So this means that we'll be able to elect 40 people to go to the convention in Philadelphia in July of 2016. Hopefully the table and the chart that you're seeing in front of you, it shows a couple of different things. It shows the congressional districts, of which Utah has 4. The delegation is broken evenly between male delegates and female delegates. It's really important that we have gender parity in our delegation. So those congressional district numbers, that means that from Congressional District 1, we will elect a total of 5 national delegates from that congressional district. Congressional District 2 will elect 6, 3 will elect 5, and 4 we will elect 6. Then, so the total number of district level delegates is going to be 22. Then we have 7 at-large delegates. These are people that can be from anywhere, right? You can even run as a congressional level district delegate. And if you lose that race, you still can run as an at-large delegate. It's kind of confusing, but it gives you a second chance. Then we have something called pleo delegates. These are party leaders and elected officials. We have 4 of these spots that will be up for election. And then we have something called superdelegates. You guys have probably heard of superdelegates during the talk of Iowa and New Hampshire the past few days. Utah has 4 superdelegates, and these are folks that have already been elected. So that's Peter Caroon, who's our party chair, Brianne Miller, who's our party vice chair, Representative Patrice Arendt, who is our DNC National Committee woman, and Wayne Holland, who's our DNC National Committee man. So those are our 4 superdelegates that are already elected. And then we get to elect 3 alternates. So first, if some reason one of the elected district level delegates or pleos or at-large delegates can't actually make it to the convention, then one of those elected alternates would get to go in their place. It's a lot of information. We'll do questions at the end. So let's talk about some definitions, right? I just gave a whole lot of mumbo jumbo and a lot of different kinds of delegates. So the first level is a district level delegate, right? These are people that are elected by candidate supporters within the congressional district from which they live. So for example, if you are we're going to be very non-committal here. So if you are a Mickey Mouse delegate from Congressional District 1, then you're only going to be elected by other Mickey Mouse delegates from Congressional District 1. If you're a Donald Duck national delegate candidate, you're only going to be voted for by other Donald Duck supporters. Does that make sense? Then there's at-large delegates. These are delegates that are selected from all 4 congressional districts. And again, if you're an at-large delegate for Mickey Mouse, you're only going to be voted for by people who also support Mickey Mouse. You're not going to have a bunch of Donald Duck people in there who are, you know, trying to get a Mickey Mouse delegate in or out. And then there's pleos. Pleos are a little bit confusing. These are people who are party leaders or elected officials. So, for example, my mom, who's a wonderful human being, she's just my mom, who I love, but she's not a party leader, nor is she an elected official. So she's not eligible to run as a pleo national delegate. She could run as a congressional district delegate or an at-large delegate, but just not a pleo delegate. So the presidential preference poll, there's a whole lot of talk right now about the primary season and all the caucus states, and Utah's kind of an interesting animal when it comes to our presidential primary. We don't have an official presidential primary, nor do we have a caucus like Iowa has. We have kind of a hybrid of the two, which is why we call it a presidential preference poll. On March 22nd, that's our caucus night, you're going to show up at your caucus location. You're going to be handed a piece of paper that looks much like the one that's on your screen right now. Now, something very important, you've got to fill out all that contact information at the top of the sheet in order for your vote to count. Our rules say that you don't have to be a Democrat to participate in our caucus. You can just be an eligible voter of any registered party. But when you come that night, you have to publicly declare that you are participating as a Democrat. Now that means you can be a registered Republican, you can be a registered Libertarian, you can be a registered member of the Green Party, but that night you have to be participating as a Democrat, which is why that contact info is so important. So you'll fill that part out, and then at the very bottom of that sheet is your actual ballot. So you'll put a check or an X next to the candidate that you'd like to support, and then you'll either put it in a ballot box or you'll hand it to a volunteer. So those ballots are going to be counted that night, but we won't have results until the next morning. So I'm sure the 10 o'clock news, you're going to be watching it to see who's winning. I think it's going to be important to note that, we'll probably have preliminary results that night, but we won't have the official results till the next morning. Now, this is another important piece. You've all noticed, for example, in New Hampshire, there were several candidates who got below 15% of the vote. In Utah, in order for a candidate to receive any delegates, right, to get a piece of that 40 delegate pie, they have to get at least 15% of the vote. So if in Congressional District 1, Mickey Mouse only gets 14.8% and Donald Duck gets the other 85%, then that would mean that Mickey Mouse did not reach the threshold in order to get a delegate. Right? So all of those delegates in Congressional District 1 would be delegates for Donald Duck. Now, let's say that Mickey Mouse, though, does get 16% statewide, right? So he would then get one of the at-large delegates, and the other candidate would get the other 6 at-large delegates. I hope that makes sense. It's a little bit confusing. So how many delegates will my candidate receive? Super good question. That's going to be based on the results of the presidential preference poll, right? So we're not going to know how many delegates each of the presidential candidates gets until the day after caucus. Oh, all the frozenness is happening. My apologies. So how do you run for national delegate? This is why we're all here. Well, the first step is that you have to file your intent to run, which means you have to fill out a piece of paper that says, my name is Lauren Littlefield. This is my address. This is my phone number. I am a, female who lives in Congressional District 2. And so I'm going to run for one of the female spots in Congressional District 2, right? So you're going to fill out this paper. It's going to be available on our website at www.utdem.org. That form will show up on March 7th, and the filing period closes on March 25th by 5 p.m. So even if you're here and you send it to us at 5:30 p.m. on the 25th, the cutoff is 5 p.m. It's really important that you get it here on time. So you have to go to your neighborhood caucuses and vote. You have to, if you want to be a national delegate, we have to be able to trace your ballot back to you. So you want to make sure that you're there on March 22nd to vote in the poll. And then you want to create your national delegate campaign. So the way you're going to do that is, we talked a little bit earlier about this, but the state delegates are going to be the ones who vote for national delegates. So you're going to get a list of all the state delegates that live in your congressional district. And you're going to be able to call them. And you're going to say, hey, my name is Lauren Littlefield. I'm really, really excited about Mickey Mouse. He's running for president. I think that we're going to have a wonderful country if he's elected, and I really want to go support him. And here's all the things that I've done to support Mickey Mouse, and you should vote for me on April 22nd. You're going to make all these phone calls, and it's going to be super fun. So something that's kind of important for us to talk about, this is a disclaimer. So in the state of Utah, we have 4 presidential candidates that are going to be on our ballot on March 22nd. That is Senator Bernie Sanders, Secretary Hillary Clinton, a man named Rocky De La Fuente, and another man named Mark Stewart. Green, sorry. And so we're going to have those 4 candidates. Now, each of those campaigns, once the filing process has closed on March 25th, they're going to get to see a list of every delegate that is filed to be, a delegate for that specific candidate. And if there is, they have a right of review, so they can strike you off the list. Now, if you are struck from the list, you're ineligible to run as a delegate. Now, presidential candidates do this for a couple of reasons. One of them is something called the Affirmative Action Plan, which I personally hate the title, but it's really important for us to have a diverse delegation. It's important to us, and it's important to the Democratic National Committee, and it's also really important to the presidential candidates. And it's also important, if there's someone who's been tweeting, anti-Mickey Mouse things and putting anti-Mickey Mouse stuff on their Facebook page and other social media, but then they file to be a Mickey Mouse delegate, the presidential candidates have the right of review to say, like, we know you're not really a Mickey Mouse supporter. So they have that right of review. They get to do it twice. Once right after the filing on March 25th, they have until the 31st to do that. And then once again after the election. So if you're elected a delegate and the presidential candidates strike you as a delegate, then you are ineligible to be a delegate. It sucks, but it is really important to the presidential campaigns to make sure that we have a diverse delegation that represents the candidates in a good way. So let's talk about running for your campaign, right? Running a campaign is something that probably sounds like, ooh, a little bit, nerve-wracking. So it's really great. It's a fun experience. You're going to talk to other people who live in your area, people who live not necessarily in your area, and, you get to meet them. You get to talk to them about why they should support you. So the first thing is create a social media page. Get a Facebook page and design up a fun logo. We had a delegate 4 years ago in 2012 named Laura Arlano, who had one of the best National Delegate logos I'd ever seen. She had a wonderful Facebook page. It's a great way for you to talk about what you're doing, why you'd be a great candidate for National Delegate, how much you support your presidential person. It can be really fun. The next thing is calling state delegates, right? Get on the phone, talk to the state delegates about who you are and why you really want to go to Philly. And the last thing is great speech, right? You want to give a great speech at the national delegate election on April 22nd. Talk to people about your role in the party, your role with the campaign, what you've done, what you want to do, and we've had some really great speeches. In fact, once we had someone dressed as a donkey to nominate someone for national delegate. So it can be a really, really fun process. So the state convention is kind of a convoluted process, right? So we talked about if you're a Mickey Mouse delegate or you're running for a Mickey Mouse delegate spot, the only people that are going to vote for you is other Mickey Mouse supporters, right? But that also means that there's people running as Donald Duck delegates. Those folks are only going to campaign to other Donald Duck supporters. So hopefully what you're seeing on your screen is a graph that shows our 4 congressional districts. So we'll have, in Congressional District 1, there'll be 2 meetings. Theoretically, there'll be 2 meetings. There'll be one for national delegates who want to be Donald Duck supporters and another for national delegates that want to be Mickey Mouse supporters. And that will reflect every congressional district. There'll be at least 2, right? And then it works the same for state convention or for at-large delegates. If you're running in an at-large spot, you're only going to be campaigning with other fans of Donald Duck and or Mickey Mouse. So who elects national delegates? State delegates from the congressional district you live in. It's going to be people who live in your area, people who live in your same congressional district who are also supporting your presidential preference. When are national delegates elected? Well, that's going to be at the state convention on April 22nd and 23rd at the Salt Palace Convention Center. Super fun. Elections will probably start somewhere around 4 o'clock is my guess. And we'll also have a really great training that day. So stay tuned for more information about that. So this is an important part. Who pays for national convention, right? Well, that's national delegates. It is the job of national delegates to raise the money to go to the national convention. It'll probably cost each delegate somewhere between $2,500 and $3,000. We've got a block of hotel rooms at a hotel in Philadelphia, and we'll work out all of that. But if you don't let not having the money not let you run for national delegate. We've had some wonderful delegates in the past who have done fundraising in order to get them there, and you'd be surprised at how many people want to help you get to the national convention. So don't let that stop you. And if you need some help on fundraising, we're also happy to help you learn how to do that. So the convention experience. The convention experience is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. We've had our 4 national delegate trainings in the congressional districts, and at those meetings, we've had some really wonderful former national delegates talk about their experiences there. And if you know someone who's been a national delegate, I encourage you to talk to them about their experience. In 2012, we built a house with Habitat for Humanity as a delegation. We had a lot of meals together, and of course, the night that we nominate the president, everyone's sort of huddled around the microphone so that we can make sure that everyone's seen by their loved ones on the television. And it's a really wonderful experience. I really encourage you to search on Facebook and find Democratic National Delegate pages and try and get in touch with those folks. They love to talk about their experience. The other thing is you're going to get a lot of swag, right? We had AT&T 4 years ago. I'll show you I got this donkey from AT&T, right? It's got a little, they just want to give you all the free stuff. So even stuffed animals, take it home for the kids. So there's a lot of fun things that happen at convention. There'll be, famous people all over the place. We have one former delegate who was sitting in a bar in a downtown Charlotte and, walked right behind him, Anderson Cooper. So it's a cool experience. And, again, find a former national delegate and talk to them about it. So let's take some questions. I've got a question from a B. McD. So something that their question is, can you vote in both the Democratic and Republican primaries? And no, you cannot vote in both the Democratic and Republican primaries. You have to pick one or the other. So I believe the Republicans are holding their caucus night in Utah on the 22nd as well. And so you'll have to pick. You'll have to either go to ours or go to theirs. But we, of course, would love to have you at ours, as you won't have to change your voter registration to attend ours. What other questions do we have? Another question. So let's see. I've read that Utah is a semi-open process, meaning that your currently registered Republicans can vote. Yes, the Utah Democratic Party has an incredibly open process. The only requirement that we have for you to vote in our primary is that you be an eligible voter, right? So once you get to your caucus location, they're going to look up your address and your voter registration. And if it doesn't show that you're registered to vote, then we're going to register you to vote right then, and we'll still give you a ballot, right? If you're registered as a Republican or a Libertarian or an American Populist or an Independent or whatever other parties there are, you are welcome to participate in our process. I hope that answers the questions that we have. I really appreciate everyone taking the time to be with us and watch our awesome Google Hangout. Hopefully we'll be doing more of this kind of stuff. And if you have any other, kind of follow-up questions, feel free to send me an email. My email is Lauren, Lauren, @utdem.org. Happy to answer any questions that you have. And you are also welcome to post questions on our YouTube or Facebook channel. Thank you very much for your time. Everyone have a wonderful day and a great President's Day weekend.